You can start now. We can start with our first session.
Yeah.
Start with our first section. Yes, sir. So you can introduce our first speaker, whoever is presenting first.
Yeah, FP34. Dr. Partha Pratim. Can you please present your?
Has he joined?
No, ma'am.
Okay, the second FP299. Dr. Diksha Singh.
Dr. Diksha Singh. I don't see Dr. Diksha has also not joined. I think we should move ahead to the next one.
Dr. Antaba. FP396.
Antaba is there.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You start now. Okay, you share your screen.
Is it visible, sir? Hello?
Yeah,
Is it visible?
It is
Not
visible.
now, sir. Not now.
Yes, started screen share.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now it's
Now it
visible.
is.
It is visible?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
Start your presentation.
Okay, sir.
It's 4 minutes for all the participants.
Okay, sir.
And after that, we'll ask a question for a minute.
Okay,
It's
sir.
not 5 minutes, it's 4 minutes presentation. There'll be a beeper at 30 seconds mostly before your 4 minutes is getting over. You can start.
Thank you, sir.
Timer can also start.
Good morning, everyone. Today, I am here to speak on my topic, correlation of OCT biomarkers with visual outcome in diabetic macular edema treated with bevacizumab. First of all, diabetic macular edema is one of the leading causes of central visual impairment in diabetic patients, and it is directly related to the longer duration of diabetes and elevated levels of HbA1c. And elevated levels of vascular endothelial growth factor has been playing a major role in the development of diabetic macular edema, and severe disruption of PROS, that is photoreceptor outer segments, and severity of diabetic retinopathy are directly related to the higher serum VEGF levels. Positive correlation has been seen between the PROS disruption and degree of visual acuity reduction. And based on the RCTs, remarkable improvement has been seen in patients treated with intravitreal anti-VEGF. However, lower visual gains have been noted in case of poor baseline visual acuity patients. And despite this, however, we have seen that in there are variations in RCTs and real-world clinical settings. So the aim of the study was to explore the demographics, clinical characteristics, and the OCT features at baseline and at week 6 early response that may be associated with 12 weeks visual response following IV injection of bevacizumab. A prospective observational study was carried out in 50 patients in a tertiary eye care center from October 2019 to January 2020. Protocols were followed according to declaration of Helsinki, and approval was taken from Institutional Ethics Committee. Informed consent was taken from the patients. OCT and all the detailed clinical examination were performed before, at 6 weeks, and 3 months post-treatment. Biomarkers like PROS thickness and continuity, integrity of ellipsoid zone, and external limiting membrane, and all the other OCT biomarkers were compared with the visual acuity. At this line, patient demographics including age, gender, duration of diabetes, and blood vision, associated systemic diseases, and diabetic retinopathy staging, etc. were done. And also diabetic macular edema treatment were also history collected. Inclusion criteria include all those patients received initial loading injections, diagnosed with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, initial visual acuity of 6/24 or worse, or had center involving diabetic macular edema, or had follow-up of at least 12 weeks after the first injection. Exclusion criteria included any coexisting ocular disease, or prior vitreoretinal surgery, or any prior cataract surgery, or laser photocoagulation, or significant ERM and traction, or intravitreal steroid injection within 4 months before initiating anti-VEGF, or had a history of CKD requiring dialysis, or administered any systemic anti-VEGF medication within 6 months prior to anti-VEGF injection. This is a pictorial representation of an example of a patient on whom we did the clinical examination and OCT before giving anti-VEGF, then followed up after 6 weeks, and then after 12 weeks. Results. Out of the 50 patients, 32 were males and 18 were female. Mean age of the patients including the study was 57.5 years. Out of 50 patients, the DME resolved in 18 patients by 6 weeks, and in total 35 patients by 12 weeks. Overall, it was seen that the study eyes who had baseline visual acuity of 6/60 plus 10 letters, and a mean baseline of eyes had a good baseline. 26 eyes had a poor baseline visual acuity. At 6 months post treatment, it was seen that those eyes with who had in some patients improved to 6/12, and in some and gain of less than 5 letters was observed in four eyes with poor baseline visual acuity. And positive correlation was seen between visual outcome and OCT biomarkers post anti-VEGF. With an overall improvement, more than 50% of the study has achieved good visual gains by 12 weeks. So in conclusion, we can say that the central involving diabetic macular edema, young age, male gender, lower visual acuity, and presence of hyperreflective foci are related with remarkable improvement following intravitreal bevacizumab. And in addition, OCT helps to assess the diabetic retinopathy at early stage, and the biomarkers used in study. So good baseline visual acuity and maintenance of ellipsoid zone predict long-term visual response. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Any questions from the panelists?
Yeah, so we have 1 minute for the questions.
Yes. How many line improvement was there in 12? How many weeks?
Sir,
You checked vision after how many weeks of injection?
sir, after 12, first of all, before doing
After.
before the treatment, and then after 3 weeks, yes, after 6 weeks, and then after 12 weeks.
What part of this vision improvement is because of the injection, and what part is because of better control of diabetes?
Yes.
So do we have a data on how well the diabetes was controlled before, or how long it was controlled, or was it ongoing? So would that influence the visual or the outcome of the patient?
Yes, ma'am. I have not properly tabulated. I have not documented in tabulated form, but it was in that I have written that patients with good baseline visual acuity and those who had very those ellipsoid zone were not disrupted, and it was a very good retinal microstructures were preserved. They had a very good prognosis, and those whose retinal microstructures were disrupted to a very severe extent, they showed very less
Didn't
significant
understand
improvement.
my question. I was talking of systemic disease control influence on the results of your study. So in your limitations or confounders, that is what you should mention. Okay, we can
Okay.
go to the next.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
The next presenter, please stop sharing the screen, please. The next presenter, serial number 4, FP644. Dr. Shweta is ready? Can you see that?
Sir is not here.
Dr. Shweta is not there? 4th serial number. Okay. 5th one, FP776. Dr. Soumya.
Yes, sir,
Saras.
we have.
Yeah, let her present next.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone.
Share your screen. Yeah. Go ahead, ma'am. Share your PPT.
Is my screen visible, sir?
You are visible, but the PPT isn't.
Is it visible now, sir?
No, ma'am.
Share screen. AV team, what is happening?
Any problem, ma'am, to share the screen?
It's opening for me, sir, but
AV team, can you go through the process with her? How to go to presentation?
Meanwhile, can we call the other?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. FP 1051, ready? Dr. Ganta Divya. Serial number 6,
He is also not there.
not there. Oh.
Not there, sir.
7 serial number, Malvika Singh, I saw her login.
Yes, sir. I'm
Yeah, can you present? Ma'am?
yes.
FP 41.
Ma'am, your bandwidth is too much low. Your video is blur.
Yeah, start presenting.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Malvika Singh, a junior resident from KGMU, and I'm going to speak on my topic that anti-VEGF therapy results in significant improvement of the disorganization of retinal inner layers in diabetic macular edema. Now, in this slide, we can see that the burden of disease of diabetic retinopathy is huge. It affects almost 93 million people worldwide. The prevalence of diabetic macular edema, which is a treatable form of diabetic retinopathy, is between 11 and 15%, and nearly 21 million people worldwide have this. As we all know, that the vascular endothelial growth factor is a well-known etiologic factor of diabetic retinopathy. It has been seen that a significant elevated level of serum VEGF comes into play even before the clinical evidence of diabetic retinopathy is seen. And an increase in VEGF has been found to correlate with an increase in central subfield thickness on SDOCT. As we all know, anti-VEGFs are the first-line treatment of diabetic macular edema. In this study, we had taken bevacizumab as an anti-VEGF agent. It is a full-length humanoid monoclonal antibody having a molecular weight of 149 kilodaltons. There are 4 retinal inner layers which can easily be visualized with SDOCT. SDOCT gives an in vivo histology of the retina. They are from inwards to outwards, the ganglion cell layer, the inner plexiform layer, the inner nuclear layer, and the outer plexiform layer. Disorganization of retinal inner layers was defined as the failure to ascertain any of the 4 layers of the retina on SDOCT and was graded as grade 0, which was the absence of drill, and grade 1, which is the presence of drill. Now coming on to the pathogenesis, it all starts with hyperglycemia, which causes the production of advanced glycation end products. These molecules cause basement membrane thickening, pericyte loss, increased expression of ICAM1 and VEGF, oxidative and nitrosative stress, which causes capillary endothelium damage and leads to fluid accumulation between the retinal inner layers, and even more expression of VEGF, which increases even more angiogenesis, vascular hyperpermeability, and a prothrombotic response, which causes further damage and leads to drill and an increase in CST. In this study, I had taken a written informed voluntary consent from all the 44 consecutive patients of DME aged 40 to 65 years. All study subjects underwent detailed ophthalmological examination, including fundus evaluation and SDOCT. My outcome measures were logMAR VA, CST, and drill. These were measured at baseline and at monthly intervals after each dose of intravitreal bevacizumab was given. A total of 3 such doses was given. Coming on to results, we observed that logMAR VA improved significantly from 1.78 at baseline to 0.42 at the 3rd dose. CST improved from about 354 micrometers to 233 micrometers. And improvement in the disorganization of retinal inner layers was seen as 93.2% patients in which drill was initially present dropped to only 13.6% patients after intervention, making 86.4% study subjects to be free from drill. We also observed a significant positive correlation between CST and visual acuity. This correlation further improved post 3 doses, suggesting a beneficial effect of intravitreal bevacizumab therapy. Coming on to the discussion, drill actually correlates to the region in the retina where the bipolar cell, horizontal and amacrine cell synaptic connections have been disrupted. This occurs in DME when the axons of the bipolar cells snap after the elasticity limit has been exceeded by the fluid. This causes an interruption in the transmission between ganglion cell layers and the photoreceptor cell layers, leading to a decrease in visual acuity. In conclusion, it has been seen. In conclusion, anti-VEGF therapy improves drill with associated improvement CST. Drill can also be used as a biomarker for predicting future visual acuity. Thank you.
So do we have any questions for this presentation?
We can, next presenter can do if there is no question.
Okay. So who is the next presenter on the
Yeah,
list?
2146 paper,
Okay.
Dr. Nivedita Guru.
I don't think so. Dr. Nivedita has joined yet.
Okay, we'll go through FP 2174, Dr. Vikram.
Dr. Vikram has not been, it's not there. It's not there.
Okay. Serial number 10, Dr. Priyadarshini Gupta.
We have Dr. Priyadarshini Gupta. So I would request Dr. Priyadarshini Gupta to start your slide share and your presentation.
My screen is visible.
Yes, yes, continue.
Good morning.
Start your presentation.
1 second. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Priyadarshi Gupta. I am presenting my slides on analysis of foveal avascular zone using a spectral domain optical coherence tomography angiography in healthy Indian eyes. Introduction, foveal avascular zone is a capillary-free area in the central macula. Variations in the area of the FAS, which is shown by the gold standard imaging of fundus fluorescein angiography, has been shown of both diagnostic and prognostic value in various retinal diseases. As you can see here, an enlarged FAS is seen in ischemic retinopathy, for example, in diabetic mellitus and retinal vein occlusions. Enlarged FAS has also been associated with poor prognosis of visual recovery. In OCT angiography is a novel newer imaging technique which utilizes high resolution volumetric blood flow information to generate useful angiographic images. There are many advantages of OCTA over fundus fluorescein angiography. The most important being it is a non-invasive procedure. There is no side effects of injecting the dye, and we can visualize superficial and deep capillary plexus together. And it is easier to evaluate than FAS and fast to analyze. In the introduction, the lacuna in the existing knowledge is evaluating the normative FAS dimensions using OCTA in Indian eyes, and evaluating different factors which may affect FAS in Indian eyes. In the aims and objectives, our aim was to measure the diameter and area of the FAS using OCTA in healthy Indian eyes, and to assess the effect of various parameters, for example, age, gender, axial length, central foveal thickness, choroidal thickness on FAS in healthy Indian eyes. We designed a cross-sectional study which included individuals of healthy eyes attending OPD of Guru Nanak Eye Center and Maulana Azad Medical College. We included people from 20 to 60 years with best rated visual acuity of more than 612. And we excluded any subject which had significant ocular media opacity, which will hinder the good quality images. Any ocular pathology and intraocular surgery. Sample size were calculated using one of the previous studies which was done in 2017, and we came out to have 200 eyes in the age group of 20 to 60 years. In the evaluation protocol, all subjects underwent optical OCT scan using the spectral domain optical coherence tomography angiography machine, and we evaluated FAS dimensions and the area, and we correlated the same with age, gender, axial length, central foveal thickness, central choroidal thickness, and spherical equivalent. The results: deep FAS area was larger than superficial FAS. Females had larger FAS than males. Axial length and central foveal thickness has negative correlation, while CCT, central choroidal thickness, has positive correlation with the FAS, and age did not influence the FAS. In the discussion, in comparison with the previous studies, our study comprehensively correlated all the factors in the same study itself into 200 patients, 96 males and 104 females. Age had no correlation, while female had larger FAS than males. CFT had inversely correlation, so did axial length. Central choroidal thickness has positive correlation with the horizontal and vertical dimensions. In the conclusion, both SCP and DCP is larger than in Indian subcontinent, and there is need to establish a normative data. A number of demographic and ocular factors affected FAS. There's a need to use axial and corrected FAS measurements using OSTA to avoid magnification. There were few limitations of the study, the one being, in our study, the effect of spherical equivalent had a narrow range because of the normal healthy population. It requires further studies in this. Thank you so much.
So it is a normative data of how many patients you said, doctor?
200 patients.
200 patients. Normal. This is a normal patient.
Yes,
Without
these were the normal patients.
Without media opacity.
Without media opacity, because media opacity would have hindered the OST angiography.
So I had one question. Why did you take 612 or better? And did you correlate anything? Because I would expect you will take only 6.6 or better. By 612, like patient has little CSCR, you get 612. So I don't know why you took 612. I think if you're doing normative data, how can you exclude that 612 or 69% didn't have a pathology? Did you do autofluorescence or visual fields or color vision to say that these are normal people with 612?
Yes, ma'am. Before the patient was...
Patients was 612 and how many were actually 6.6?
Ma'am, most of the patients fell into the category of 6.6 to 6.9.
See,
Before
most doesn't work in research. You have
Yes.
to tell me out of 200 how many were 612, how many were 6.9, and what was the rationale of taking 612 or better?
Ma'am, the 612 vision in the normal people are not able to do 6.6, 6.9, 6.12. Before incorporating any individual into the study, we did the fundus examination, we did the color vision testing, we did their baseline systemic factors, and then it was included in the study, ma'am.
I'm not fully convinced. Is there some literature which talks about that you can take 612 as a normal person? If I have 612, I won't be able to do retina surgery, So one argument could be that yes, there's the ETDRS chart has a test retest variability of 2 lines. So we can say that 2 lines are within the test retest variability. So we can take 612. But I think if you take 612, you have to show that you've done autofluorescence or fields to say that these are normalized and there was nothing else there. So just put that as your limitation and then put the data of what percentage of people or proportion were 6.6 or better. Okay, you can.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, doctor. Can you stop share screen? The next paper, FP370. Dr. Lalit Verma.
What is the name of
I'm here.
Yeah,
Can
hello,
you
good
see?
morning.
Dr. Lalit Verma is there.
Yeah. I'll just
Yes.
share my screen. Is the screen visible and audible? I'm
Yes.
audible. Good morning, everybody. I am here to describe our initial experience with this new kid on the block, that is Pagenex produzumab. We all know ARMD is a leading cause of visual loss, and VEGF levels are known to be higher in this disease. A lot of pivotal trials have been done on this disease with various anti-VEGF molecules, and various treatment regimes are in the work. But there are a lot of unmet needs. First and foremost is trial versus real world experience is totally different. Endpoint of treatment is not very clear in this disease. And which fluid is tolerable, people have differences over this. There are various types of fluid, IRF, SRF, and subretinal fluid. And it has been shown that all fluid is bad for retina. This is what I also believe. And it has been shown in various studies also that better visual outcomes are observed in patients who do not have fluid. Brolucimab, we all know, is the newest kid of anti-VEGFs on the block. It's the smallest of all the anti-VEGFs which are available. If you see this chart, the molecular weight of brolucimab is 26 kilodaltons compared to 149 of bevacizumab and 115 of aflibercept. FDA approved this molecule a couple of years back, and HAWK and HAVIER was the pivotal trial, and it showed that the greatest difference in the CST reduction was observed between brolucimab and aflibercept. But immediately after that, there was an alarm. 4% incidence of intraocular inflammation was reported. And this was reported world over, with a lot of papers subsequently appearing in literature. And these are some of the highlights which I have listed here. So, what were our first impressions of using this brolucimab? There was a lot of hesitancy in the beginning. This was one of my first patients which I injected. Patient I initially took was BCVA with very poor vision. And you see with one injection, vision has not improved, but the thickness has gone down. This was my second patient where you see the detachment, RP detachments have decreased in height, and there is a resolution of sub-RP fluid as well as the IRF. This was the third patient, relatively younger lady, who had this multiple detachments, and she was symptomatic. Even though she had 6/9 vision, I still injected a near normal restoration of this contour on this lady. This lady subsequently required 2 more injections, and the latest follow-up shows a normalized contour with no IRF, no SRF, and no sub-RP fluid also. This gentleman, elderly gentleman, apart from having evidence of ARMD, he had ERM also. But despite that, we gave injection, and this was he already had received 6 injections. You see, all these patients where we injected, they're all, resistant to treatment with multiple injections of aflibercept and ranibizumab. He also required multiple injections, and the latest follow-up shows BCV of 6/12 and marked reduction in all the fluids. So, in initial experience of 9 of these patients showed not much difference in the visual acuity if you see the mean visual acuity of all these patients. But what is noticeable is a drastic reduction of CMT. And this is graphical form showing mean BCVA pre and post, and this is showing mean decrease in central macular thickness. So where are we? One thing is very certain from whatever small series we have is there's a marked drying effect of brolucimab. So how do we apply this in our clinical practice? So what do we do is take a special consent, talk to the patient, talk to the patient. And what we do is patients who are not responding to multiple anti-VEGF injections, we study the trend of CST reduction in BCVA. If it is positive, we continue the previous anti-VEGF injection. But if not, if it is negative, that means either BCVA or CST is not reducing, then we do not hesitate to give choice of brolucimab, explain the risk-benefit ratio, take a written consent. As far as our experience, very initial study is concerned, very small number of patients, but it looks to be better suited for RPEDs and IPCV kind of membranes. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
The series is only 7 patients, sir. Just started now, the newer drug.
It's a newer drug. There was a lot of hesitancy in starting because of marked inflammation and the scare created. Fortunately for us, none of this, as of now, this is the series with more than 4 or 5 months of follow-up. But we have now 16 patients on our. But the good thing is, as of now, although we still need more of data, there's no inflammation because I have taken pictures on day 1, day 7, day 15, and every week we have taken. There's no inflammation, no vasculitis, no vascular occlusion. So that is the thing I wanted to highlight, because the world literature says, and there is so much of scare on this molecule, that there is marked inflammation. But I just wanted to highlight, we haven't got this.
Thank you, Dr. Lalit. I think that was very nice presentation. And when you looked at the patients who were treatment naive, what was the thought process of injecting them? Were they because they had very bad other eye, or so those were not the failed cases. So currently also you may have injected more patients with treatment naive. So what is the thought process there?
No, honestly, treatment naive has been only one patient in all these 16. Rest of them have been resistant. Honestly, they today do not have enough guts to start treatment naive on this molecule. In treatment naive, we do prefer the established either ranibizumab or aflibercept. Only one patient, that patient also had poor visual acuity of finger counting 2 meters. I had some guts to start on this, and that patient.
Yeah, so maybe what you're trying to say is that the risk benefit ratio you are assessing, and in the naive patient, maybe the risk we feel is higher because they are safer drugs. And for the patient who has really failed multiple injection treatments and still things are going down, so there we can take that risk.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Very nice.
Thank you, sir. Very nice presentation.
Thank you.
So we once again run through the first presenter is available now, FP34.
Name of the presenter, sir?
Tora Kamal Datta.
Kamal Datta. No, they have not. He has not joined yet.
Partha Pratim.
Yes, sir.
Partha Pratim is the first presenter.
Partham Pratim, I think he has joined, yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Partham Pratim, I request
Yeah,
yourself and start your video. Yes, so you can go ahead with your presentation, Dr. Partham Pratim.
The first serial number for the judges.
Yeah, I am audible.
Yes, sir. Can start, sir. Can start your presentation, sir.
Yeah, myself, Dr. Parthutim Roy. My topic is bilateral branch retinal vein occlusion in a patient OCP, which is very rare. There is no financial disclosure or conflict of interest. The patient details are, she is a 35 years old female. She presented to us with bilateral dimness of vision for 3 weeks, which was associated with mild headache. The dimness of vision, which was abrupt in onset, painless, without any history of trauma, discharge, or any sort of photophobia. There was no significant history of past illness. On drug history, the patient was on long-term medication of oral contraceptive pills, which included ethinyl estradiol and levonorgestrel for last 2 years. Her family and socioeconomic patient belongs to low middle class, and she had no significant allergic history. Her immunization history is fully immunized. General examination, she is average build. Other general parameters are within normal limit. On ocular examination, her vision was in the right eye, it was 4/60. IOP was normal. Color vision, lid, conjunctiva, cornea, SC were within normal. Iris was normal. In the right eye, the grade 1 RAPD was noted. In left eye, it was normal. Lens was transparent. This is the fundus picture. Show the superior temporal BRV in right eye, and in the left eye, it was also superior temporal bilateral BRV. This is the fundus fluorescein angiography showing tortuosity of blood vessels, non-perfusion areas. There are few dot and blot hemorrhages noted. This is the OCT picture we've done in both eyes. In the right eye, it is showing cystoid macular edema. The left eye, it was normal. So we come to the diagnosis that it was bilateral supratemporal BRV with cystoid macular edema of right eye. In the management part, we advise the patient to discontinue OCP, and a single dose of intravitreal bevacizumab was given. Follow-up was done after 6 weeks. The outcome, the visual acuity gradually improved in the right eye from 4/60 to 6/24 after 6 weeks, and in the left eye, it was 6/60 to 6/20. So in conclusion, the BRVO is an uncommon complication in young patients with without comorbidities. There is no other cause of retinal vascular thrombosis in the patient apart from OCP treatment. So considering the available data, to consider and it's reasonable to consider a causal relation association between the OCP and PRV. Thank you.
How did you rule out other things like vaccination is not the part of it? Because you said completely vaccinated female. And it's a one single report, no, sir. It is not a series of.
Yeah, yes, it is a single
report?
rare. Yeah,
Why
single
not
report,
vaccination,
yes.
sir?
Vaccination is in case of there may be infectious etiology also. So we have ruled out all the infectious causes.
You are talking about COVID vaccine only, no, sir?
Yeah, COVID vaccine.
Okay, so
COVID
recent-
and other, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So I think if you have to implicate OCP, then should we not be demonstrating that the OCP caused some systemic fibrinogen problem or coagulation factor problem or some thrombotic profile change? Like if the OCP is causing a BRVO, should we demonstrate that it caused something in the blood which then caused this?
Yeah, the OCP can cause hypercoagulability.
Yeah.
There
So
will
what
be
was the
increased
blood?
sticky.
How was the hypercoagulability status of this patient?
We have tested prothrombin level and activate partial thromboplastin time, then other coagulation factors. These were within normal limit, but we, after doing all the systemic workup and everything, we can't find out any other cause for
No,
this.
that's what I said. So for us to relate it, we can just say this was an association. For it to be a cause, the coagulation should have changed. Then only it will cause thrombosis. And last question, you told the patient to stop OCPs. So what did you advise instead of that?
She was having 2 childs, so we told her to better to go for family planning and better to stop this OCP, which may be the cause of our bilateral BRVO.
So I would have expected that you would have told her to consult a gynecologist and maybe take.
Yeah,
barrier.
we have referred the patient to gynecology only, and they.
Yeah. So I think you will need
advised her.
to sort of. I mean, you can say this was an association. I'm not sure that we can't. We can say that it was causative because we've not demonstrated an effect on the blood. But the presentation was very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we'll go to the next presenter. We'll give a chance
Yes.
to the second person there. FP299. Dr. Diksha is there.
Yes.
For the last time we can call out her name.
No, she's not there.
Dr. Diksha has not joined.
Okay. FP644.
Shweta? Shweta is not there.
Dr. Sweta also is not there. Final call for her.
Okay.
Final call for Dr. Soumya. Sarah.
She's there. She had a problem.
Soumya is there. Dr. Soumya is
I
there.
got out my problem, sir.
Yeah, connect. Soumya, connect.
Simple, ma'am.
Yeah. Now we can go. You can go ahead, ma'am. We
Good
can
morning.
see you.
I'm presenting a case report of hemorrhages of the eye in a case of adult onset hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. Introduction: hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis is a rare fatal condition caused by overactive immunological response of the histiocytes and lymphocytes. It can be primary form, which is hereditary, or secondary form associated with bacterial and fungal infection, viral infections such as Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus virus, herpes virus, and other underlying diseases, principally autoimmune disorders and malignancies. Primary form is also known as familial hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, an autosomal recessive inheritance pattern. It commonly occurs below 1 year of age. Secondary form is often diagnosed in older patients and there is no family history. Associated ocular findings have been reported in few cases. This is a case report of 22-year-old male who was apparently normal 1 month back, after which he developed fever for the past 1 month. Patient also had intermittent episodes of epistaxis and melena with history of weight loss. He is a known case of seizure disorder. On physical examination, patient was cachetic, paler and mild icterus was present with multiple purpurous skin lesions over the upper lip. Blood count showed neutropenia and pancytopenia with elevated serum ferritin level. Viral test and leptospira test was found to be positive. Serology of virus and cytomegalovirus virus showed features of sites with erythrophagocytosis. PET scan showed hepatosplenomegaly with perisplenic and periportal lymphadenopathy and multifocal increased metabolic activity in multiple bones suggestive of lymphoproliferative disorder. Hematology opinion was obtained and started on injection dexamethasone once daily, injection meropenem thrice daily, and tablet cyclosporin BD, tablet voriconazole BD, and tablet etoposide once weekly. On review, complete blood count was done. Platelet level was dropped to 14,000 per cubic millimeter, and patient was transfused with 4 units of platelets, and then the count was improved to 47,000 per cubic millimeter. Patient was referred to ophthalmology department with gradual painless diminution of vision in both eyes for the past 1 month. On examination, BCVA was 6/36 and N18 in both eyes. Anterior segment examination of the right eye was within normal limit. Left eye showed resolving subconjunctival hemorrhage in the infralateral aspect. On dilated fundus examination, with the patient present with a normal optic disc and multiple retinal hemorrhages involving the macula, with right eye showed absorption of macular hemorrhages at the time of presentation, indicating the response to the treatment. Lab investigation, hematological evaluation showed neutropenia and pancytopenia with elevated serum ferritin level. There is no growth in blood culture. Discussion, our patient meets the diagnostic criteria of hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, including fever, splenomegaly with elevated serum ferritin, pancytopenia, a diagnostic bone marrow biopsy demonstrating hemophagocytic histiocytes. We report a rare finding of hemorrhagic retinopathy in a case of adult onset HLH, and patient is on steroids and immunosuppressant therapy. Andrew et al. Reported broad spots in adult onset HLH, which could be secondary to pancytopenia. Rarely, this syndrome may manifest with findings such as optic nerve involvement, retinal hemorrhages, and multiple white perivenous retinal patches in previous literature. Reported HLH patient presenting with unilateral panuveitis the first sign prior to systemic changes. Conclusion, hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis is a rare disorder and can be a life-threatening multi-system inflammatory syndrome. This case report emphasizes the importance of careful ophthalmic monitoring and early diagnosis to prevent vision-threatening complications. These are my references. Thank you.
Can you go back to that slide of the eye findings?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I'm really impressed. I'm so happy at your presentation because you've, documented everything. It would be nice to have follow-up photographs if possible.
Okay, sure. Nice, ma'am.
Because that would be something very nice to say that, what happened later in terms of the photographs.
Okay, okay.
Excellent
follow up the patient.
Collection of all the information and something which I learned. I have not seen a case of this. I don't even know about this entity. So great case.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Any questions?
You're muted, sir. Dr. Anand, you're muted.
Sorry, ma'am. Yeah, last and final call for Dr. Ganta Divya, fee paper number 1051, serial number 6. Is she there?
No, sir.
No? Okay. Then the last call for serial number 8, free paper 2146, Dr. Nivedita Guru. Is she there?
No, sir.
Okay. Final call, serial number 9, FP 2174, presenting author Dr. Vikram Vinayak. Is he there? Dr. Vikram
No,
Vinayak?
sir.
No, sir.
Dr.
No, sir.
Okay. We have given
No,
ample
sir.
time. We have called their names thrice. I think we have done justice. I don't think they can show up later also. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Nice to see you.
Thank you, everybody. Soumya, if you are there, I just wanted to add that in your first slide, if you could just put the duration of these systemic symptoms, You have mentioned that patient had weight loss or feeding loss or whatever, all those, the duration was not mentioned. Were they preceding the eye problems and nobody diagnosed him, and only when he got the eye problems, then we started picking up these findings. So just add that part.
Okay,
Wait.
sure.
So, sir, we can close the session.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
AD. Thank
It
you.
was a pleasure to hear everybody, especially Dr. Verma and Soumya and our friends here.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
We would like to thank all the judges as well as all the presenters for this insightful session. Thank you so much for joining us here for this session.